Veshavti, Besholom, Part 4, Ois Vav. So in the beginning of the Maimer, we spoke about the promise that Yaakov makes when he leaves Haran, and he promised Hashem, if I'll come home in peace, all the things that will happen as a result. And specifically, the most important thing is that this stone will become a Beis Elikim, a house of God. And the questions that we asked on the Pasuk, including one of the important questions, which is, how can a stone become a house of God? And not just a house of God, but a house of Vahaya Avaya Lililikim, which means a house of Elikim, the way it's in the future, that Elikim is actually a higher level than Elikim is now. It's corresponding to the level that's Avaya now, the godliness that's above the world. In Ois Beis, the Rebbe explains that as every story in the Torah, this is not just a story, it's a lesson and directive for every Jew, but more than that, something that happened with the Avos, with our ancestors, with our forefathers, is something which is a sign. It came into the world in order to bring in the world the reality that will happen with the children. That happens with every single Jew. And therefore, this whole escapade of Yaakov as he leaves Beersheba, he goes to Haran, and all of his promise, etc., is all something which is a sign and something which happens in the life of every Jew. And the Rebbe continues to say the idea of, in Ois Gimel, the idea of Yaakov leaving Beersheba, and the Rebbe explains it in two ways, whether Yaakov is leaving the level of Bina in order to go to Malchus, meaning he's still in the spiritual world. He's just leaving a level where he's completely one with godliness and going into a world where he's dealing with action, which has to deal with physical world. Or whether he's leaving totally the world of godliness, he's completely leaving the world of Atzilus in order to go into the world where he's involved with the physical world itself. And the main explanation is that Yaakov is actually going to get involved with the physical world in order to elevate the sparks, which begins with Lavan and later on with Esav. And in Ois Daled, the Rebbe explains that that's the idea of Vayetze, because it's all about leaving. It's all about going out of one's place. In every Jew's Avodah, it's about going out of the place that I am in order to fulfill the mission that I'm heading on. That by fulfilling the mission, and as the Rebbe explains, that it depends on what type of mindset one leaves. That when the leaving is in a mindset of Yaakov Yud Ekev, that the Yud is actually what controls, the head of Yaakov is what controls even the heel of Yaakov, including the heel of the world and the heel of Esav. In that way, even when he leaves, he's going out with that mission and with the realization that everything is Hashem, and therefore he's able to accomplish his mission in a way that's greater than Avram and Yitzchak. The Rebbe continued then in Ois Hey to explain that together with the fact that as a result of the Avodah that Yaakov does, as a result of him fulfilling his mission by Lavan and Esav, he reaches a much higher level and therefore receives much higher energy and much higher powers than anything that he had earlier. But even more than that, the fact that he's leaving on a mission, before he leaves on a mission, in order to have the power to fulfill his mission, he receives also that higher power and energy, and even more than anything that he's had before that. And the Rebbe explained that what he gets is the Shin Ayin Hein Hayrin the Arich, the 375 lights of Arich. Now to explain and understand what that means, we know that the world, the godly energy that's in the world, is made up of 7 spheres. The 7 spheres are 7 channels of godly energy that draws down the light of godliness into the physical world until it reaches Malchus, which is the lowest of the 7 spheres. And even more than that, there's Malchus, the way it's part of all the other 7 spheres. It's another channel. And then there's Malchus, the second half of Malchus, the way it becomes the source of the lower worlds. The energy that it's drawing down into the world comes from the 3 Moichin, the source of the godly energy, just as in a person's midas, a person's emotional attributes are an outcome of his intellect, because the intellect is something that connects to something spiritual, something higher, and what the intellect deals with gives birth to the emotions, to the feelings that the person has. For example, a person understands with his intellect the concept of godliness. He learns a Maimer Chassidus. He understands about Hashem. When he thinks about it and recognizes and realizes until it becomes real to him, then that affects his emotions, which are the feelings that are within him, that they also correspond to the ideas that were in the intellect. So the intellect is what we call the mothers of the emotions. Now, in a person, in his world, these are called the koiches pnimim, the inner powers of the person, because they're still connected to the person. They're still part of the person. It's his intellect, his emotions. There's also koiches makifim, which are a power that's above the person, and that's the level of keser. Keser is like the crown that's above the head. Keser also means that which is surrounding. It's above, it's beyond, and it surpasses all of the intellect and emotion of the person. It's the essence of the person. And in Keser itself, there's Arich, which is the way it's drawn down into the other aspects of the person, and Atik, that's completely removed from the person. In the godly world, there's the same thing. There's the 7 channels of godly energy in the world, which are like the emotional attributes. They channel godliness into the world. They're a result of the moichin, the so to speak intellectual powers of godliness that are above the world, that they deal with the godliness itself. But then all those are what comes into the world. But then there's the keser, which is the essence that's above the world, that's beyond the world, but it has 2 parts. Atik is removed from the world. Adich is what it draws down the essence of godliness into the world and into all the powers, the physical powers of the person, of the world. Now, in Arich, we're told in Zohar, there's Shin Ayin, 370. In many places, it speaks about 370 channels of light, 370 lights of Arich. And some places, like in this Maimer, it talks about 375. But let's first start with the idea of 370. What is the midos, the emotional attributes to their fullest power? The emotional attributes to their fullest power because they're connected to all the other attributes. So when take them to their fullest power, that's when we times them by 10. There's 10 altogether, intellect and emotions. There's 10 spheres. When we times the 7 attributes by 10, that shows on the emotional attributes the way they're to their fullest power. What's the moichin, the intellectual ideas which are above the world to their fullest power? That's 10 times 10, because 10 times 10 shows on bringing them all, not just to the fullest power the way they're in the world, but to the fullest power where they're in their very essence. Now when Arich is drawn down, it draws down the light into the world. It's basically the essence, but because it's Arich, it connects to the world. It brings everything else to its fullest power. And that's why we say that in Arich there's 370, 300 for the 3 Moichin, 70 for the 7 Midas. There's 370 channels of light in Arich, meaning Arich brings everything, magnifies everything to its fullest and greatest extent. In this Maimer, we speak also about the last, which is not necessarily 5 as in the number 5, but more as in the letter Hey. The letter Hey, we know that the world is created with an Hey. The letter Hey corresponds to Malchus, but specifically the lower half of Malchus, that becomes the source of the physical world. So that's not just the 370 lights, but also the final one, which is the 5, the Hey, which is how it comes into the world. When a person leaves, or when Yaakov leaves Haran, to go, Beersheba to go to Haran, he's going to fulfill a mission. He's given from above the powers of Arich that magnify his own attributes and his own koiches, his own powers and all of his senses, to make them come to their fullest extent, to give him from above the fullest power and ability, one that he doesn't have otherwise, because a person usually connects only to his moichin and his midas, his own intellectual and emotional powers, the way it connects to him. when a person leaves and goes on a mission, he's given the essence, and the essence fills into him, both in his own life and in the world in general, to give him the fullest extent of the power to be able to accomplish that mission. To understand this idea even more, why does a person get such a strong power of the 375 lights of Arich just in order to fulfill his mission? So Rebbe continues in Ois Vav. When did Yaakov Avinu's tefillah, this strong and powerful tefillah that he gave, and it wasn't just a prayer to Hashem and a supplication to Hashem, but it was Vayidar Yaakov Neder, it was in a manner of a neder, a promise, which is something which is even stronger than a supplication. It's something where a person connects to the very essence. When did he do this? After beginning to do what the real mission of his going out to Haran, to show and express what it was all about. And that was Vayikach me'avnei hamakoim vayasem erashoisav. Yaakov went there and he took from the stones of the place. And the Rebbe explains, what's makom? Space. Space and time is the very essence of what our physical world is. The very definition of the physical world, the world that's seemingly separate from Hashem, is the concept of space and time. The opposite of godliness that's above space and time, that's not defined by space and time. That defines our world. And the Rebbe continues, we know that Makom refers to Hashem. And as it says, Hu Mekaimai Shel Olam, Hashem is the place of the world. Ve'ein Olam Mekaimai, the world is not his place, he's the place of the world. And in Kabbalah, it explains that why is Makom, why do we say that Makom it means Hashem? Because if you take the word Makom and you look at the gematria, the numerical value of the word Makom, it's 186. If you take Shem Havaya, the name of Hashem, Yud Ke Vav Ke, and you times it biribua, meaning you square it, you times each letter by itself. 10 times 10 is 100, 5 times 5 is 25, 6 times 6, 36, and 5 times 5, 25, altogether 186. What's the concept of that? When we see that something is not able to be expressed just by the letters of a particular letters, but rather it has to be expressed by the numerical value. That shows how distant this concept is from what you're comparing it to, that you can only compare it by going to the value of it. You can't compare it with the letters themselves. More than that, when the value itself is also not compared, but you need to now explain it and express it in an even stronger way by timesing and by timesing each letter by itself. That shows that it's even more distance. You need to work even more to make that comparison. Which means that to be able to find Havaya, of course, the reality of Makom, of space, is Hashem. But to be able to find it and discover it, one has to take the value of it, the numerical value, the gematria, and even go further in times each letter by itself. That's how far away Makom is, because the essence of what Makom is the opposite of Hashem. Its truth is that Hashem is revealed there. Then it continues on, and we talk about not just the space, but stones. A stone is an inanimate object, which shows its distance from godliness. It's not alive. It doesn't even grow. It definitely doesn't move and doesn't understand. It doesn't speak. It's the furthest thing from the expression of the reality of Hashem, which is truth and life. And not only that, we go further. It's not just a stone, but these stones, plural, because plural shows on Rosh Hashanah. The essence of godliness is one, unity. The fact that there's plurality, the fact that there's a lot, that shows how far it is away from Hashem. Yaakov goes into the place into makom that doesn't express Hashem, into the stone, and into these stones, plural, and he takes those stones and he makes them into one stone. The avodah of Yaakov is taking the thing which is the furthest away from Hashem and revealing in it godliness, revealing in it how it's really one, how it's really connected to Hashem. And as such, once Yaakov does that, he's able to take this stone and put it by the head of Yaakov, meaning above the head of Yaakov. And as we said, the head of Yaakov is the Yud that shows that everything is Hashem, in a way of constancy. And yet Yaakov is able to put it above the head of Yaakov. Above that is this stone, when one is able to reveal in it and show in it how it's really one which is Hashem. That's an even deeper thing. And the Rebbe explains why is that. And that will go on with Hashem next time with Ois Zayin. But the idea of it is, as we spoke earlier in Ois Aleph, that there's the concept of a stone becoming Beis Elikim. But there's three aspects in that, or there's four aspects, but more specifically, or what we speak about here is three aspects. One is that the stone becomes a Beis Elikim, a place where godliness can be revealed. Yes, it's a stone, it's an inanimate object, it's the furthest thing from godliness. Elikim, godliness, the godliness that's in the world could be revealed in it. That's an amazing thing. Beis Elikim, to the extent that becomes settled there, it becomes a home for it. Take it a step further. That not only is the godliness that's in the world revealed in it, but even Havaya, which is above the world, which is in the future going to be considered Elikim, that also can be revealed. The godliness that's above the world can be revealed in the stone, because that's the essence of what things are really all about. Here in this size, the Rebbe speaks something even deeper. Beis Elikim, it becomes a home for Atzmos, for the essence of Hashem, because the essence of Hashem, as we'll learn later in the Maimer, is revealed when a person fulfills the ultimate purpose of Hashem, which is to take the lowest of the low and to understand and reveal how the truth of it is the essence of godliness.